Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to the Greenbelt Black History event, February 15th. We're really thankful and grateful that you've all come today. Our mission is to highlight and celebrate the contributions of Black Americans in American history and culture, from the past to the present and towards the future. The committee will design programs with the goal and purpose of celebrating and honoring the African American diaspora. I'd like to note Dr. Woodson's poster here. He's the founder of the Black History movement, if you will. Now, Dr. Lois Rosado will perform Pour Libation in honor of our labor and civil rights ancestors. Dr. Rosado.
Each year when we start our celebrations, we try and honor those individuals, our ancestors, who have contributed and helped move us forward. Now, it's called the libation ceremony, and in many African American homes and cultural programs and programs that focus on African American history, we pour the libation to honor and praise our ancestors. As we call each name, we ask the audience to say Ashe. It's equivalent to Amen, but Ashe is an honorary term that we use in our culture. We praise our ancestors for their determination to survive the transatlantic era of African enslavement so that we, their descendants, are present today. We praise Callie Howes, Isaiah Dickinson, who fought for pensions, health care, and reparations for the formerly enslaved. We thank A. Philip Randolph, who organized the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters Union and helped to improve pay and benefits for all workers. We honor Bayard Rustin, who organized the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and was the architect behind the March on Washington. And he is also a person that I personally had the honor of working with on a school boycott in Brooklyn. That's how old I am. We thank Dorothy Richardson Dandridge, who founded in Maryland the Cambridge Nonviolent Action Committee to end desegregation and advocated for better jobs, housing, schools, and health care. We praise the Piscataway ancestors who nurtured this land and honor Turkey Tayak, a former chief of the Piscataway Nation. We also praise and remember Council Member Rick Gordon, who was a member of the Greenbelt History and Culture Committee and was greatly admired and respected for uniting residents in Greenbelt. And now we call on you, the audience members, to call the name of an ancestor who greatly enhanced your life. Ready? Call him out. Thank you. Ashe, Ashe, and Amen. And now if you please stand, we're going to sing the Negro National Anthem. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let every sound loud as the rolling
the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won.
Third stanza.
God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, thou who hast by thy might led us into the light. Keep us forever in the path we pray. Lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met thee. Lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadowed beneath thy hand, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to our native land. Now we will have remarks from Tiana Davis, the representative of the Prince George's County Office of Human Rights.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tiana Davis. I am the Outreach Specialist with the Prince George's County Office of Human Rights, the county's civil and human rights, education, and enforcement agency. Our office investigates complaints of civil rights discrimination. We combat human trafficking around the region. We ensure we ensure equitable language access to all county government agencies, and we provide opportunities for engagement on areas of social justice importance. It is our honor to partner with Greenbelt's Black History and Culture Committee in bringing this event to you today. Black history matters. Black history is American history, and while we believe and know that Black history is to be shared, acknowledged, and celebrated year-round, we respect Black History Month as a time to do a deeper dive into some of the stories, some of the collective history of Black Americans. I will be in the back with some materials from our office if anyone would like to talk to me after today's program, which honors African Americans at work. We know that African Americans literally built this country. Today we were here just a small part of that. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. The bio for Mr. Sadiki is on the table. I'm not going to read the bio. I am going to read a presentation description, which I think is very important. I also want to say that Mr. Sadiki was inducted into the Black Scuba Divers Hall of Fame in 2023. On December 3rd, 1794, the São José Paquete de Africa, a Portuguese ship transporting over 500 captured Africans, mostly Makua people from Mozambique, departed the northern coast of Mozambique for what was to be a 7,000-mile voyage to Maranhão, Brazil, and the sugar plantations that awaited its human cargo. Tragedy struck after 24 days on the voyage. On December 27th, the São José Paquete de Africa crashed into the rocks off Clifton Beach in Cape Town, South Africa. After attempts to salvage the cargo from the wreckage, 212 Africans lost their lives. In June 2015, after more than 5 years of research underwater archaeology work, the Slave Wrecks Project a partnership between the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture, the Izeko Museum of South Africa, George Washington University, and Diving with Purpose, which is the name of Mr. Sadiki's organization, announced the discovery of the Sao Jose de Africa shipwreck. It represented the first slave shipwreck ever discovered that sunk with captured Africans on board. On July 9, 1860, the Clotilda sailed into Alabama's Mobile Bay, ending an illegal mission as the last slave ship to bring captured Africans into the USA to be enslaved. There were 110 imprisoned human souls in its cargo hold. In June 2018, the wreckage of the Clotilda was located in Mobile River. Kamau Sadiki participated in the underwater archaeological work on the wrecks of the Sao Paulo, Jose Paquete de Africa, and the Clotilda with Diving with Purpose strategic partner and Slave Wrecks Project, Search Inc. Kamau is here today, and he will share his experiences and his knowledge with us. Please welcome to the stage.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Lozado. I really appreciate that. And good afternoon to everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here in Greenbelt to share some of my work and ideas and thoughts and experiences. And I want to thank the Greenbelt Black History Month Committee for their foresight to keep these stories alive, because we know the atmosphere we're in now of erasure and deletion, distortion, so we have to push back against that. So this presentation is going to be about remembrance, memory, reclamation, reclaiming, and more importantly, resisting. I'm going to try to tell the story of my experiences of working in the space of underwater archaeology and documenting shipwrecks that was involved in the enslavement of African people. And as I go along, you're going to see that there's some incredible stories, some 12,000 ships was involved in that period of world history, but we only know about of a few of them. And each one of them has an incredible story to tell. If I ask you now to name at least 3 of those ships, are you able to do it? If I ask you to name maybe one, probably come up with the homicide. But if I say the Nina, Pina, Santa Maria, what instantaneously come to your mind? But those 12,000 ships are the ones that shape world view right now. They are the ones that made it possible for all of us to be right here enjoying this conference we're enjoying right now. But yet they are not remembered. But today we're going to remember. We're going to remember. A little bit about Diving with a Purpose. It got started around 2004 by an incredible gentleman named Ken Stewart. He was down in the Florida Keys and I went to the National Biscayne Park, if you've ever been down in the Florida Keys. And he met an archaeologist down there that was just giving, the U.S. Congress had just passed the National Maritime Heritage Act. And as they do, they passed the act but won't give you no money to do the work. It was an unfunded mandate, and so the archaeologists in the park had all these wrecks, 100+ wrecks in the park. Ken Stewart just happened to meet her, and they began talking, and she said, I have no idea how I'm going to document all these wrecks. And Ken Stewart, who was the Northeastern representative of the National Association of Black Scuba Divers, whom we call NABS for short, he said, well, I got divers. How can we work this out? I said, okay. Well, if you can bring me divers, I will give you the boat, the equipment, and train them how to do this work. And so Ken came back to the organization and sent out an email. He said, hey, y'all, are you tired of looking at pretty fish and beautiful coral and so forth? And he said the expression, do you want to dive with the purpose? And that's how our organization was founded, and we've gone forward since then. So every year we take certified divers down into the Florida Keys, particularly in Key Largo, and immerse them in an intense program of underwater archaeological documentation. And we teach them how to do that. So we're sort of priming the pump for the next generation. And we have a youth program also called Youth Diving with the Purpose. It's critically important that we engage the youth, and I'll talk about them in a moment here. So we teach them how to do this kind of work, to survey the site, to identify artifacts, how to do what's called trilateration mapping, that's measuring artifacts better relative to other artifacts in the space we find it in situ drawings, we actually draw underwater. We have to draw these artifacts on this special paper called Mylar paper. And we come up with a map. And this map is used by maritime archaeologists to infer what happened at the wreck, put it in proper historical and time context, etc., etc. So the work that we do is critical. Actually lifting the stories of these wrecks off the seabeds and putting it in the discourse or the narratives about these wrecks. And of course, we also do the historical research. We go to the archives even before we dive the wreck to do the work in the archives. These are the young folks that we're training. We're training to do not only underwater archaeology, but also to have respect for the maritime environment that we're working in. We have another program called CARES, C-A-R-E-S, Collective Approach to Restoring Our Ecosystem, where it teaches divers how to monitor coral reefs. Our coral reefs are in distress now. Whether you're aware of it or not, you should have some awareness. Why? Take a breath. Take another breath. That second breath came from those coral reefs. So our lives are dependent on the health of those reefs. And so we're teaching young people, and we have an adult program in coral reef conservation as well. Here you see them not necessarily outplanting, they're preparing to outplant coral. They are growing coral actually on what we call these coral trees. And once they become mature enough, we take them to a distressed reef and actually plant them there, and they will start growing. But it's very small effort. It needs to be scaled up massively in order for us to save it. But we're doing something. We're doing our part. And if we can get all you all scuba diving and doing this. I told you about the archaeologists at Biscayne National Park. She was possessed by the fact that she thought that the Guerrero shipwreck was in the park, in the Biscayne National Park. And we said, well, we'll help you find it. And so we've been searching for that wreck for some 20 plus years. And right now, we think we've located it, but it's not, we don't have the so-called smoking gun. These ships have bells on them, sometimes, most of them, majority of them. And if you find a bell and it says Guerrero, we say, Eureka, this is it. But we haven't found a bell, we haven't found anything that specifically say Guerrero, but we found enough circumstantial evidence for us to say with confidence that we know where it is, off the coast of Key Largo, Florida. We've done a bunch of missions down there. Another mission that we're proud of, not just on shipwrecks, this has to do with the Tuskegee Airmen. The Tuskegee Airmen. Now I'll just run through this real quickly. This is Lieutenant Frank Moody. He's a Howard University graduate. And after graduating, he went down to Tuskegee to train. And then once he got his training at Tuskegee, they sent him up to Suffrage, Michigan, the Suffrage Army base in Michigan, to train, to prepare to go into the Mediterranean theater, because the lakes up there are sort of a good space to train in to get a sense of the Mediterranean. So Frank Moody was flying a P-39 Cobra airplane. He was flying about 300 feet off the lake surface, going about roughly 300 miles an hour, and he lost his engine in his plane and immediately went into the Lake Huron. And when he hit the water, of course, it was a fatality. He became a fatality right away. But from 70 years to the date that he went into the water, on April 11, 1944, April 11, 2004, we located an artifact. Well, I didn't. There was another ship accident. A tugboat had sank. And so the salvage crew was looking around, and they found a part of the door. I think I got it here. I'll show it to you in a moment. I just want to show you how we sort of identified the wreck. This is the cockpit of that airplane, P-39 Cobra. I didn't have it there, I don't think. No, I might have it in the next slide. But this is the cockpit, and on the cockpit you can see that's the control panel, the instrument panel. I'm a general aviation pilot as well, and each one of these dials on that control panel there that you're going to see in a moment, and it's the last visual image that Frank Moody had before he went into the lake. This is that instrument panel on the bottom of the lake. So we found this instrument panel, but how do we know it comes off the P-39 Cobra? Of course, it looks just like it's laying to the side now. It has what's called a radio call signal number on it, 221228, and that was Frank Moody's radio call signal. This is a tire from the airplane. It's part of the wing section. I'll show you in a moment. That's still very much intact. The tire is still inflated. Still has air in it. This is the engine of the P-39 Cobra. And what makes it so unique, the engine in the P-39 Cobra is behind the pilot. This is about a 450 horsepower massive engine. And so when he went into the lake, that engine just came straight through the cockpit. He was actually decapitated, and they found his body about 2 months later, at least part of it. They have, the P-39 Cobra have these big machine guns on them, 50 caliber machine guns. They was laying on the bottom of the lake as well. And even the live ammunition was still laying there after 70 years, undiscovered. And so we extracted a lot of those. And if you're ever in Detroit, there's a Tuskegee Museum a Tuskegee Museum section at the Wright Museum in Detroit that you can visit this and see those artifacts. This is the the tail section rather, of the aircraft, and that's me working on the tail section there. This is the wing section that I mentioned, and you can still see the Army star here. The Air Force wasn't organized back then, 1944. They had an Army Air Corps. And look, this is the red light, the red navigation light that's on the port side of the aircraft. All that was still very, very visible that Frank Moody looked at. And this is what we come up with when we do this work. We come up with these maps or these drawings we call in situ drawings. We try to draw it exactly as we see it on the seabed. And you can see here, that's the inflated tire that still has the air in it. This is the cockpit here where Frank Moody was sitting. The engine was back here. So this is the team that did the initial work back in 2015, my colleagues. That's me in the center. And so in August of 2021, we found that there are about 5 more Tuskegee airmen in the bottom of Lake Huron hadn't been found yet. And so we put up a memorial in August of 21. We got the city of Port Huron involved. And actually, I don't have her picture here now. She was a council person at the time, an African-American woman, but now, this last election, she was elected mayor. So she helped us with some resources to put together this monument to acknowledge the work of the Tuskegee Airmen. Some pilots and courageous pilots who believed and gave so much for a country that didn't believe in them. And so we honored them with this monument. And DWP was part of that effort that's shown here. And when we dedicated this, we invited some of the Tuskegee Airmen to come. It was in the blue jackets, and some of them were part of the Tuskegee Airmen Club up there. But these are actual Tuskegee Airmen here. This is Mr. Ferguson, Colonel Ferguson. Unfortunately, 2 months after we did this dedication, he transitioned. We celebrated his 100th birthday up there, and he was so proud. And this gentleman here is Harry T. Stewart, Lieutenant Colonel Harry T. Stewart. He turned 100 this year as well, but unfortunately, if you followed the news, he transitioned about 2 weeks ago. I'm very passionate about this next point, okay? I'm very passionate about this next point. And we have to really understand it if we want to do this type of work and bringing all these unknown, unrecognized victims back into humanity. What is it? I want you to know that my ancestors were never slaves. They were never slaves. They were forced into a system of enslavement, right? Based on system of racism, white supremacy, that enslavement was a condition that they was forced into. It was not their identity. It was not their identity. I was looking at something this morning, school children in the state of Texas are getting black children to perform as slaves so they can study about it. You know, how can you? That's very crushing to their confidence and everything right out of the box. So I consciously removed that word from my vocabulary. So we were never slaves. They were enslaved. They were human beings, and we have to look at it from that perspective, from my view. So what happened to this period? You know, we can talk about, when I say the Holocaust, this was a Holocaust as well, but typically the Holocaust is related to the horrific things that happened to Jewish people during World War II, even prior to that. So there's an African term called the Ma'afa, And what it is a great disaster, a great happening. And so this is our Ma'afa. The transatlantic era of African enslavement was our Ma'afa. And so I don't say the transatlantic slave trade anymore. I call it the transatlantic era of African enslavement, and that would be my reference going forward. So let's just deal with some rhetorical discussion questions just real quickly. Can you imagine what it would be like to live, without memory of who you are, where you come from, your history, your culture? Can you imagine that? There's attempts of erasures for that to happen. So memory, if we say, connects a person to their history and ancestors, who are disconnected from those ancestors' memory, how does it affect your identity? If you're disconnected from that history, who are you, can you say? Now here's the most critical question, I think. How does it become possible for a nation founded on democratic principles of freedom and justice for all to allow over 250 years of shadow slavery in the U.S., abundance of more than 5 million human beings? How is the shaping of so-called Western civilization has a global system of brutal bondage and oppression? How could it exist for 400 years and not be deeply embedded in our memory? Why aren't we all aware of what's happening? Why can't we name more of these vessels? Why can't we tell more of these stories? What's the reason for us not to know? And why so much energy and effort is put into for us not to know? It must be empowering in some way. So if someone tells me that book is banned, I'll run straight to the library or the bookstore, because something in there they don't want me to know. So, Lonnie Bunch? You know the name Lonnie Bunch? Lonnie Bunch was the one that built from the ground, square one, the first brick, the National Museum of African American History and Culture. But currently, he is the secretary of the Smithsonian. He's the secretary of the Smithsonian, and he wrote a paper last year in the Atlantic magazine, and I think it puts into context the rest of this discussion. He said, one can tell a great deal about a country by what it chooses to remember, by what graces the walls of its museums, by what monuments are venerated, and by what part of this history are embraced. One can tell even more about what a nation chooses to forget, what memories are erased, and what aspect of its past are feared. I think that's a profound quote. There are more Confederate monuments in this country than monuments that deal with enslavement. So you can tell a lot about the country what they choose to remember, or want you to know, want you to remember. So without memory, there is no future. We have to have memory in order to go forward and deal with the future. So in cultural heritage and collective memory is profoundly important. The two are connected. It includes the objects our ancestors interface with, and we can infer the way they live, the way they learn, the way they talk, the way they love, so forth and so on, and build that cultural heritage. But sometimes we don't want to remember. This was part of an exhibit at the Smithsonian called the Afro-Atlantic Stories. This Brazilian boy is pouring white paint on his head to forget. He don't want to remember. But reclamation of our memory is so important. It restores memory. Restoring memory and collective identity is essential in order for us to heal ourselves, to repair ourselves, to repair the harm, and reclaim and restore dignity and humanity to those that was victimized. If anything, if no takeaways from this presentation, I want you to understand that our ancestors constantly fought, day in and day out. They resisted to retain their humanity, to retain their human beingness. It was, any human being would do that, right? But they fought, but the resistance story is not very much told here. So they resisted. A few highlights, you might know this gentleman here. This is his appropriate name, Simbe Pai, but you might know him as Joseph Sinkay. He was the leader of the Amistad Rebellion. This is Nat Turner. He resisted in a way. And I'll show you in a moment. Nat Turner was motivated by religious ideology to restore his humanity. But he resisted in a very violent way, as you know that story. Zumbi Palmares in Brazil, he resisted. We have to find a way to acknowledge them because we like our smartphones and other technological devices that depend on strategic minerals. Industrialists are scraping the bottom of the Atlantic right now for these strategic minerals. And they're going to disturb these bones. And so we're trying to set up a protocol for them to operate when they do that work. So how do we ritualistically memorialize these ancestors? We have to remember them first. We have to know that they're there. Okay? We have to know that they're there. So the National Association of Black Scuba Divers put down this memorial back in the 90s, actually, on the Henrietta Marie. It was a vessel of enslavement that had dropped off over 200 Africans in Jamaica, and it was trying to get back to England with its loot. And it was coming around the Keys, and we think it was a hurricane came up and sunk the vessel. And back in the 70s, the vessel was located, and we went down there and put this memorial down to acknowledge them. So a little more information here, and we'll deal with some of the archaeology. Shipwrecks and voyages of the transatlantic African enslavement. As I said, there was some 12,000 ships involved in the trade. They made some 40,000 voyages across the oceans. But we know from the record, and there's many, many more, I think, but we can document about 1,000 wrecking events, 1,000 or so wrecking events of those ships. Now, given that number, I'm sure that's probably many, many more. But out of those 1,000 wrecking events, how many have been scientific or archaeologically documented? Only about 15. Only about, and I stand here very humbly and say that I'm probably the only African American that's dove on 6 of those, that's worked on 6 of those 15. And so we can imagine or speculate or even speak factually of why this is the case. Why such an event that has impacted all of our lives we know so very little about. It involved the capture and the movement of some 15 to 20 million. Academics like to say 12.4. I don't know how they got that exact. I think that number's a bit conservative. But I say 15 to 20 million at least. Some scholars, Philip Curry said 25 million, who did consensus on the enslavement period. And it's the largest forced movement, involuntary movement of people in human history. But yet, there's a profound silence and shame around this period. The Merriman was a Dutch East India Company vessel. Dutch East India Company was very much involved in the trade. They probably was considered the first global conglomerate. They was involved in a lot of things in terms of trade. Spices, sugar, tobacco, wool, wheat, grains, and so forth, and also black bodies. So the Merriman, they tried to go into Madagascar, and they had captured these Africans and trying to get them to enslavement. So this gentleman here, Masavana, was one of them that they captured, and he was one of the leader of his people. So when the Merriman set sail, Masavana led a revolt, and they took over the ship. They killed some of the crew. The captain and a few other of the crew retreated back into the stern of the ship, back into the back of the ship. And so Masavana, those they celebrated and so forth, out in the middle of the Indian Ocean, but they had a problem. They didn't know how to sail the ship. So they entered into negotiation with the captain they had retreated, And the captain said, okay, if you don't harm us, we will sell you back to Madagascar. Masavana said, great, let's do that. And so what happened next, after they resisted, was the crew tricked them. Yes, it's the fundamental part of the whole system is deception. And so they were deceived, and they sailed straight to South Africa. And so when the South African citizens saw this derelict ship floating off coast, they thought they was going to be invaded. So they had what called a militia to come to the coast. And the captain, when Masavana saw the coastline, he looked, said, wait a minute here. These are not Madagascar birds. This doesn't smell like Madagascar air. Where are we? We're going to kill you. This is not Madagascar. I said, no, wait. We'll send a crew on shore. Send 3 of your men on shore to see if this is Madagascar. And if it is, they'll light 3 fires. Masavana said, okay, let's do that. And so the crew preparing to get ready. The captain retreated back in his space, in his office. He wrote a quick note and threw a bottle out of the window. Put it in the bottle and threw it out of the window. The bottle washed up on shore. The militia retrieved that bottle and they read it. And they said, please light 3 fires. And when the people got to the shore, that Madavana's people got to shore, of course they was executed. And then the militia lit 3 fires. Masavana saw the 3 fires. He started celebrating. Let's abandon ship. They abandoned ship. The Merriman drifted. He eventually crashed into the beach. And Masavana, when they got ashore, some of them was killed. He was arrested and put on trial. This is you're looking at Cape Town, South Africa here. This is called the Lion's Head, a very prominent monument over Cape Town. And this island over here, that's Robben Island. That's from Nelson Mandela. Served 27 years during the era of apartheid. And so Masavana was put on trial and sent to Robben Island. And that's where his graves exist today, on Robben Island. This is Robben Island here. And that's Cape Town in the background with the famous Table Mountain there. How many of you have heard of the Zong? The Zong massacre should be deeply embedded in your memory as well. An incompetent captain was trying to get his captives to Jamaica. He misnavigated, missed Jamaica, ended up way out into the Gulf of Mexico. Oops, did I say Gulf of Mexico? Ended up out in the Gulf of Mexico. And he recognized his mistake. It was going to take about 4 or 5 days to get back, but he didn't have enough provisions. So he came up with the scheme that I would throw some Africans overboard and collect insurance when I get to Jamaica. And he began to throw men, women, and children overboard, alive, in shackles, over a 2 or 3 day period. You can see the numbers there. The Leuston, remember the Leuston. The Leuston was a Dutch vessel as well. It was a massive Dutch vessel. They started building these vessels for larger capacities. And this one had about 680 Africans aboard, right? So on January 1st, 1738, it was trying to get to Suriname. It wanted to go up the Suriname River to get to Paramaribo, but it went up the wrong river. The captain recognized his mistake. He reversed course, came back out. When he came up the Marty River, a hurricane, we think it was a hurricane that struck. And then it was a massive storm. The captain knew that he couldn't sail through it, so he decided to drop anchor and wait it out. He dropped anchor, the Leuston swung around, and the stern slammed into a reef. It breached the hull and started taking on water. The captain realized that he could not save his ship. So he gave the order to abandon ship. Abandon ship. But before he told his crew to abandon ship, he told them to lock down the hatches. So those 680 people cannot escape. In chains, in shackles, over a 2 or 3 day period. As the ship broke up, they fell into the sea and drowned. The Aurora is a vessel that we're working on now in Mozambique, near the island of Mozambique. It was usually Mozambique. It was another one of those massive vessels. This is the Ilha de Mozambique here, a beautiful island. I've been there about 15 times now doing this work. It's about 2 miles long, just about a half a mile wide. There's about 14,000 people on this island, but the Portuguese colonized this island and built this fort right here. But right off the tip of the island, there's a number of shipwrecks around the island. The lighting doesn't do it justice, but it's a beautiful, very beautiful island. So it's located about here. This is Madagascar. This is the country of Mozambique in Southeast Africa. There's a bay there. This is the island of Mozambique. There's a bay called Mussuril. And the Aurora is located, that's the tip of the island, that's that fort. It's located right about here. You can see this reef that it ran into. Another story of resistance. It was getting underway with about 700 Africans on it, and they resisted. They resisted. They lost control of the ship. There was a storm as well, and the ship ran into the reef. Unfortunately, about 400 Africans went down in this wrecking event, 400. And so we treat all of these sites as very sacred sites, sacred space where people have lost their lives. And this is some of the archaeology from the Aurora. If you look here, you can see this material here. This is embedded in the seafloor. This is inside of the ship. This is called this inner planking, and it's nailed to what we call framing here. This is outer planking. I think I got a slide in there that illustrates that. The hull, that's the inner planking, outer planking, and then the framing that's nailed. So this is the side of the ship. I think we got another, oh, that's the graphic that I was trying to show you here. The side of the ship, that's the outer planking, inner planking, and so that's what you're looking at, the top part of the ship here. Got that? Got that? Okay. So this is what's called a photogrammetric image of that site. This is what you was just looking at, an image you was looking at prior. That's it right there. And so we've done some more excavation and went across and finding similar materials over here. So what we think we're looking at is something like this. The stern of the ship, the back part of the ship. Okay? And what makes this even more incredible, as I said, it had over 700 people on it. It's about 150 feet long, about 38 feet wide, and we think it's completely buried. Completely buried. Out of those 12,000 ships that I mentioned, most of the wrecks that we know about are scattered across the wrecking event. But you don't see a contiguous ship. But we do know one I'll mention to you later on here. So if this thing is buried and had 700 people on it, then the day that we started, as you can see, we started dredging or excavating here. All this stuff here needs to come out as well if we want to get into the inside of the ship. The South Suez Phuket, Africa. Real quickly here. This is off of Cape Town. You can see these condos here. This is a beach. We're taking these dredged materials down. The South Suez was coming from Mozambique, that Bay of Mussuril I showed you earlier, coming around the Cape. It was going to pick up provisions, but a storm came up and blew it into the rock. It was headed to Manuel, Brazil. And 212 Africans was lost in that event. This is a picture I showed earlier. This is called Lion's Head. Went into the archive, discovered the captain's deposition after the wreck, because these were investments. People invested money in these vessels, right? And they wanted a return. So they kept meticulous records. So we found the record that he said that the ship crashed under the Lion's Head. Gave us a clue, and we went down there and found the rock that it crashed against. The South Suez and its victims is laying in this space right here. This is Clifton's Beach here. During the air, you can see the water's a bit turbulent. That's the same rock, Cherry Rock. And during the era of apartheid, these luxurious condos has been built right up on the beach. This is Clifton Beach. This is the rock that South Suez crashed on. We began to discover some of the artifacts. Lonnie Bunch that I mentioned earlier, when he was conceptualizing the museum, he said, I want a vessel of enslavement in my museum. That's why the South Suez is there now. So we recovered some of the artifacts in that manifest of the captain when he was embarking from Lisbon, Portugal. He said he had 1,500 of these called ballasts, ship ballasts. They're used to stabilize the ship once the load is taken on of human beings. These are the iron ballasts here. They're on display at the African American Museum. We also found some of the ship sailing riggings. This is a pulley right here in situ as it lied. This is it after it was being conserved. It's in the museum as well. And this piece here, just for a moment. This is what we think it's part of the ship, but it might have been part of the cargo. But whatever it was my first visual of materiality from these wrecks. And I remember before we even dive on a wreck, we do the research, and then we do the initial dive we call a survey dive, where we just go and inspect the space and see what's out there. Give you a little context here. The water temperature is about 45 degrees. There's tremendous surge, meaning that the water is pushing you back and forth, back and forth. So I told you we was drawing. So in order for us to document this, the water push you this way, you come back, you draw a little bit, push it this way, come back, draw a little bit more. It's very turbulent. There's great white sharks in these waters as well. We wasn't concerned about them, but we knew they was there. They probably came and checked us out, and we didn't even know it. Nothing we can do, right? We're in their house. But anyway, the water is very, very cold. And I remember doing this survey dive and just struggling with the water and the currents and so forth. And I came around these rocks and I saw this number here. And I said, wow, this is about 2013. This is my first visual of seeing some of the materiality of a vessel that was involved in enslavement of our ancestors. So I paused for a moment and studied it. I said, come on, you gotta at least touch it. And so I scooped over to it and I grabbed it. Something's being triggered here. It's coming back. I remember after I grabbed it, I felt the screams and the hollering, the pain and the suffering of all those people that went down on this wreck. It was very real for me, very real. She's a doctor, PhD now, of biological archaeologist and paleoanthropologist, is Kenilo Molompani. You know, she was my dive buddy at the time when I was working on this project. She's very playful and trying to get her focused, but she was moving around and messing stuff. And I was dredging, trying to uncover some of the material. And so she tapped me on the shoulder, and I looked and said, and so what she was pointing to was, there was an abalone shell. The wreck was about 30 feet, still getting some sunlight, and the sunlight was making these iridescent colors shine in the water. She was fascinated by that. So I went over there and to look at it. I said, oh, it's a shell. And so we collected it, got it. And I looked back over where I was. The water was just pushing. I said, oh, I can't go back over there. I want to start dredging right here. I started dredging there, and this is what I found. This is a bar shackle. You can't plan this. This is a bar shackle. And it's on display now in the museum. This is the bar shackle here. That's been conserved. So this is where it was located. So the people came from the Mussuril district here. This is in Mozambique again. This is Mozambique Island. They came and was trying to get back to South Africa and on to Brazil. So when we found this wreck, we went and told the people, the Makua people, we found the location where your ancestors lost their lives. And so if you know anything about African cosmology, if you're disconnected from your ancestors, it's like you're always wandering around lost, misguided, where to go. You don't have direction because you're not connected to those that came before you. And so this elder in the village, he spent all day lecturing us about his people and the space and their culture and heritage and so forth. And Lonnie Bunch was there. We had a whole entourage with us. ABC 60 Minutes guy, what's his name? I'm sorry? No, he's one of the older reporters for 60 Minutes. It'll come to me, I'll yell it out. Not Morley, it was another one. After Morley, more recent. I think he's still there. But anyway, he was with us. And they had a crew there because Lonnie Bunch was with us. After he told us his story, he went and scooped up some soil from the village. And he told Lonnie Bunch, take this soil back to that wretched space and bring our people back home. So he gave it to Lonnie Bunch, and Lonnie Bunch called me over and said, Kamau, take this, put it on that space, and bring these people back home. So we went back to Cape Town, South Africa. This is the last visual that the people have. This is called a ramp of so-called slaves. They went down this ramp and got on the ship, even in Aurora, this ramp right here. So this is back on the beach. It was an incredible day. This is the rock that the South Jose crashed on. The media entourage was just incredible. It was stormy, it was raining. You can see the big waves there. We told Lonnie, we can't dive in this, man. It's too risky. It wasn't safe. So we decided to just walk out into the surf with the soil that he gave us. It was myself, and this is Yara. She's a Makua person. This is Tara. She's a so-called colored from South Africa. We represented the African diaspora. We went, and each one of us took turns depositing soil into the surf. And I remember this day very vividly. I mean, you know that scene in Lion Kings where, what's not Mustafa, the other guy that holds up David and make this profound speech, and I was going to walk out there and hold this dirt up, honor the ancestors and so forth. Nothing could come out. Nothing could come out. And as soon as we deposited the soil, believe it or not, the rain stopped. The sea got calm. And Lonnie Bunch talks about this. If you read his book about a fool's errand, about his work, he talks about this. So we went back to the village and told that elder, we have fulfilled your desire, your wishes, your mission. And there was a profound pregnant pause that day. And then he said, Kamau, now our people are home. And now when it rains on our village, that's like the tears of our ancestors watering and fertilizing our land again. Another story of incredible resistance and memory, right here in the U.S., near Mobile, Alabama. In 1860, Timothy Meare decided he can thumb his nose up at the Federals, the feds up north, supposedly. They were very much involved in the trade as well. But anyway, he said he can circumvent the 1808 law, go to Africa, capture some Africans and bring them back to Alabama and enslave them. And he succeeded. This is the route of the Clotilda here. They left in March, went to Dahomey, came back to Mobile in July. This is Timothy Meare. This is Captain William Foster here. What makes this story so incredible, after they had offloaded the 110 individuals, Timothy Meare told William Foster to take the boat, the Clotilda, upriver and burn it to destroy the evidence. Fortunately, when they set it afire, it sank before it fully burned. So it's right there in the Mobile River today, and you're going to see some images here in a moment. But it was all based on deception. Always deception, right, and deceit. William Foster, to get his papers to sell, he told U.S. Customs that he was going to St. Thomas. This is a reproduction painting of the Clotilda done by Nat Geo. And this is just some documentation that shows that it did happen, because people were saying that it was a myth, particularly the folks that benefited from this rouge. So Captain William Foster even said later that he transferred his so-called slaves to the cane brake, then tied them until further disposal. Then he burned the schooner, the Clotilda, to the water's edge. So this is Africa Town. This is Mobile, Alabama there. Right north is Africa Town community here. This is the Mobile River, and this is 12 Mile Island. And this is where the Clotilda lie right there. Incredible books has been written about this story. This is one written in 2007, which I think is the best of the lot, by Natalie Robinson, a scholar at Hampton University. Dreams of Africa in Alabama by Sivion Jouf. This one's just recently out, talking about the survivors. Hannah Durkin is a British scholar that found some more data on the survivors of the Clotilda. And you've probably seen this one called The Barracoon, written by Zora Neale Hurston. I encourage you to get some of this material. But Africatown is a community that the survivors of the Clotilda established around 1867, and it still exists. The descendants of those survivors still exist in this community. But it has suffered tremendous environmental injustice, economic racism, etc., etc. You can imagine. As it happened to a lot of black communities, the state of Alabama put down a highway right smack through the community. Almost destroyed it, but they resisted and survived. This is the location where they actually got off the boat, right up on the bridge. How is that? You know? So this is a space of remembrance for those people. But it was almost destroyed by this bridge. This is the only materiality, artifact, if you will, that's surviving today. That's original Africa, one of the survivors of Africatown, Peter Gomprey. This is a chimney from his homestead. And you can see the highway. The rest of the town is on this side. Both sides, they have a little small road that runs through, but they put a major highway here. And I'll show you in a moment, there's a church here and a cemetery. People can't even cross the road, the highway safely to get to and pay respect to their loved ones crossing this highway. This is the church here, Union Baptist. Here, they're celebrating the 50th anniversary. One of the leaders of the Clotilda survivors was Kazula. He was given the enslavement name of Cujo Lewis. He founded this church. This is here, memorial in the front of the church. It still look as it was back in the day. Still looks the same. This is a monument to him in Benin from his ancestors. This is a memorial for him in the old cemetery across from the church. We don't know exactly where his gravesite is. This was a memorial put up to honor him. But some of the other survivors and their descendants are buried on this side of the cemetery. The other side, you see some of it here is a more modern side. But this is where all the Clotilda survivors and most of their descendants are buried on this side of the cemetery. You can see the cemetery is in somewhat disrepair. There was incredible effort being done by local archaeologists here. Dr. Alexander Jones, who does archaeology in the community, she is leading an effort to get the cemetery documented, surveyed, and restored. This is where the Clotilda lie, on the Alabama River here. We was there in May of 22 doing an extensive archaeological field mission, and recovered over 94 artifacts. We put about 90 of them back after we got cataloged and documented. We kept 4 to conserve them further. That's me reaching into the tank there. This hose pipe here, we think was the savior of the ship. It was something that anchor chain runs through, and also when they release water off the deck of the ship, it goes through these pipes. So there's one in the stern of the ship where in the captain's quarters when it was for his toilet. We think that pipe was open and the ship sunk stern first, and you'll see an image here. And while it was on fire, he left it open, so that was a saving grace. This is an incredible artifact. This is one that we're conserving. It is a pulley. You see the pulley mechanism. And we think it's a part of the system that controlled the rudder on the ship to make it turn. And what's even more incredible here, some of the original rope is still wrapped around the pulley. And we can do diagnostics on that rope in terms of how it's braided, who the manufacturer was, and so forth and so on. That idea about spiritual essence that I mentioned earlier. I told you the story about what happened here with this artifact on the South Jose. This is a piece of the hull of the Clotilda. We know that our ancestors grasped that hull, touched it. Some of their essence is embedded in that hull. What we're trying to do is give voice to these ancestors. Before we dive these wrecks all over the world, I conduct what's called an ancestral ritual, so the divers can begin to listen to these whispers, to these voices that our ancestors are speaking. And we have cowrie shells and do the little ritual, and they carry these cowrie shells down with them in their scuba vests. And I tell them that, you cannot go down there and start listening with your ears. You're not going to hear anything. You have to listen with your heart. You have to listen with your heart. They will speak to you, and they will direct you. You know, some of y'all might think that's a bit esoteric, but I have experienced it. I'm standing before you. I have experienced it, and continue to experience it. On the Clotilda, there's voices that spoke to me. Yes, they spoke to me. And so, I'm not going to talk about this. It talks about how I know that. I'm from a town in South Carolina called Greenwood, and they're doing a big exhibition on my work. And I was being interviewed by the paper, and she asked me, Kamau, how old are you? And I said, I'm immortal. I didn't say that to be vain or to be funny or anything. I said that because I know I'm connected to those that came before me. I'm here now doing the work for those who are going to come after me. So it's a continuum. I'm connected. I will be around. Whoever's going to inherit Kamau's spirit when I'm gone, I hope it's a good person. But yes, we are immortal. We're always around. We don't want to be forgotten as an ancestor. So that's kind of what that deals with. And this archaeologist, I'm going to wrap up here in a few minutes, Dr. Lozano. So he said, when you're dealing with shipwreck sites in which people have perished, and awareness of the spiritual element is vital, that the best outcome is to be attained. So we know there's something there. And I'm working on a piece called The Essence of Underwater Archaeology, the Spiritual Dimension. So this is a side scan sonar of the Clotilda, right? This is it how it lay on the Mobile River. What makes this artifact so incredibly valuable? Once it's gone, it's gone. And there's debates and arguments saying that we should take it out of the river and put it in a museum somewhere. We shouldn't do that. No, we understand the power of place, where it lies right now. It's critically more important. Once you take it out of the water, it's going to set in a deterioration process so fast, it's not going to be worth. Just to take it out of the water is about $10 million. Not to start even conserving it. But anyway, you can see an outline of a ship here, can't you? Out of those 12,000 vessels, this is the only one where you can see that outline of a ship. It might happen on the Laurora that I showed you earlier because it's completely buried. We don't know yet. But for now, this is the only one of those 12,000 ships where we have almost a complete vessel, about 80% of a vessel. And this is another side scan sonar. Side scan sonar is just we send down sound signals. It bounces off whatever's down there and comes back and create an image. So this is the ship. Some of the parts of the ship. This is the back part, the stern. This is the bow. What's even more incredible about the Clotilda, we still have the hold, the cargo hold, where the 110 endured the crossing of the Atlantic for almost 3 months, 2.5 months, if you can imagine that. So nothing like this exists in the archaeological or historical record. So to give you a little bit of context here, the visibility diving in the Mobile River, visibility is 0. You can barely see your hands, right? There's water moccasins in the water. Yep. And there's sharp objects on the wreck, metal and wood that you can impel you, and so forth and so on. And there's current. The river is flowing. So we have to be aware of all that. And there's just some more images of the Clotilda that you can barely see. You can barely see. So I knew I was going to be diving on the Clotilda. And a dear friend of mine named Sabrina Johnson, she said, Kamau, you remember your experience you had on the South Suzanne? I said, how can I forget? She said, well, this one's going to be even more powerful because you have the actual cargo hold that those ancestors were in and endured the crossing of the Atlantic. So you have to do something before you go down there to acknowledge them so they can speak to you a little louder. So we came up with an ancestral prayer. It's been triggered again. So we came up with an ancestral prayer. I'd just like to share that prayer with you and we'll wrap it up. An ancestral prayer first died on the Clotilda, reviving the spirits who traveled on the Clotilda. Beloved ancestors, your voices have been silent, quiet for 162 years, but your silence ends now. Your voices and memory are lifted now from this wretched vessel through us, and we welcome you to speak through us. Our connection will never be broken. We are because of you. Thank you for reaching out to us. Blessings to your spirit always. Until the lions learn to tell this story, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. This is Vasco da Gama here, a statue of him on the Ilhas de Mozambique, that island of Mozambique I showed you. And behind him is the museum. In that museum is the curation of the story of Portugal, not Mozambique, not even the people of Ilhas de Mozambique. So we are working with them people on the island to repurpose and retell the story of the people and still the Portuguese on their own land. Thank you so very much.
Kamau, one of our members, where's Katie? Yeah, one of our members was given these posters from an estate sale, and it's called African American Achievers. This is a legacy poster, and it is by Rosetta Rosekert Hayes, who is not African American. She is a European American, but she really captured the likeness and images of some of our greatest heroes.
Absolutely, this is incredible. Yes. Thank you for this. Thank you so very much. Yes. And I didn't mention it, but I'm a first-time brand new grandfather. That's a great teaching tool. Thank you. Thank you so very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much for coming. Joe and I really appreciate it. I know it's hot here, but I think the presentation was so informative that people really stayed for the entire thing.